Welcome back. Perhaps no issue exemplifies California's political dysfunction more than the state's budget process, which year after year fails to come in on time and is often filled with questionable assumptions and accounting gimmicks. Every year, a group known as the Big Five, that's the Speaker of the Assembly Minority Leader, the Pro Tem of the Senate Minority Leader, and the Governor, attempt to negotiate the state's budget. Two legislators who have been through that process of the Big Five are our guests today, Senator Cogdill and Assemblymember Villines. So let's talk about the budget for a second. What is the problem here? Why can't we get a budget passed on time? By the way, a realistic budget passed on time.
Well, I think at the end of the day, it really boils down to ideology and the different views that each party has of government and its role. And for us as Republicans, it's about making sure that government is a good partner, if you will, with business and industry to create jobs, put people to work, raise revenue through that process on the natural, and be able to provide for the needs of the state. For folks, I think, on the other side of the aisle see government as more of the salvation, if you will, or the one that's there to solve the problems of society rather than allowing the public sector to work through a lot of these problems on their own. As a result of that, these roles continue to grow, and the costs associated with them continue to grow.
Well, it seems like in California, we want a certain level of government. We just don't want to pay for it. Is that the problem here?
Well, I mean, I think that's human nature. It's always
everybody likes a bargain.
It's just like a business deal. It's the perspective of who's on the other side and what they think. But I would say that Californians clearly believe they're paying too many taxes for not enough services. I would say that they feel that way in general. And I would also say that Californians haven't been, the legislature hasn't done a good job of talking about what are our priorities. Some states actually do a budget that says if we have deficits, these are the first things that have to go. That would be critical work for the legislature to do. Dave and I have pushed for that for the two budgets we negotiated. And the special interest and others don't want to see something like that done. So, yes, people want more than what they get. They feel like they're not getting enough for what they pay right now, and that's an interesting contrast. The key is the legislature's got to show genuine goodwill and hard work ethic and solve problems to get that trust back.
Well, everyone talks about eliminating fraud, waste, and abuse. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard that, and no one disagrees about that. But the reality is, shouldn't some kind of revenue or revenue reform be part of any solution here?
I would agree.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, if you look at how our revenues are generated in the state and realize that the folks that make over $100,000 a year generate 80% of the revenue into the state of California, you can see that we have a
and that's highly volatile as well, right?
It is highly volatile. So it needs to be flattened, it needs to be simplified, and it needs to be broadened.
But here's the conundrum. If you do tax reform, and it results in a tax increase, then people are going to say, you're just raising taxes, and that's the third rail for a politician. If, on the other hand, you do tax reform and it results in lower revenues, well, you've just made the problem worse.
Sure.
So how do you solve that?
I think you take a page. You've
got a minute.
Yeah. Well, we gave it 6 years or more, but actually, I think it's actually rather simple. I mean, stripping the politics and and stripping out special interest is difficult. That's part of the layer that we might not have time to get into now. But Ronald Reagan, as governor, was able to develop a budget that, as governor, had revenues, but was able to reform and actually have the state running well.
He raised taxes.
Well, he did then, absolutely, but that was a straight tax increase with reforms. As President of the United States in the 1986 Budget Reform Act, those were taking away a lot of the deductions, which in today's terms would be argued as a huge tax increase, and still got reforms. Both times he was able to manage an overall process, and I think what we would advocate is that you have to have an overall look at how you have sustainable revenue into the state of California and priorities. Otherwise, those folks that make the money Dave is talking about, when they leave, we implode again. We cannot go through that again. We need to be smarter.
Well, you've got a situation where the public doesn't really understand the facts. There was a poll done that found that 91% of Californians don't know the largest source of state revenue, happens to be income tax,
right,
and they don't know the largest state expense, which happens to be education. So we've only got about a minute or so left in this segment. Senator Cogdill, if they don't know the basic facts, how can they make then decisions to improve the problem?
Well, it is very difficult, and it's one of the problems as it relates to politics in general in this state and everywhere, and that is the 30-second, 60-second soundbite that gets very involved in the campaigns that we have and to targeted audiences, and it's pretty well done in such a way as to get the certain reaction at the poll instead of really educating people to the problem and letting them make their own common sense decisions. And that's really the key to all of this, I think, when you talk about getting back on track, because most people see it and in their common sense they say there's no reason why it needs to be this way. It ought to easily be able to change to this, and that's the difficult part, obviously.
Well, great. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about reforming the political process. Is California's experiment in extreme democracy gone wrong? That conversation when we return. This is the Maddy Report.